Likes for its colonies to be unarmed, which is kind of the future for this nation, too. The screenshot on the front of this is from an article about a shooting over social media arguments. I've had to deal with a lot of that. Ooh. Anyway, we got a lot of colonies that are depending on us. Like England. England is highly dependent upon the United States because England lost its empire. England ain't the only ones that lost their empire, though. The Germans lost their empire, and the Japanese lost theirs as well. I am all sorts of snotted up and nastied. Frozen history, I guess. The history of boogers and nose icicles. Alright. Thank goodness for McDonald's napkins. Now, I'm completely uncouth. And a lot of these uppity European type folks, you like how I use that word? They act pretty hoity-toity, but they're pretty well dependent upon American stuff. And Russian stuff, too, which is amazing. So, Germany is dependent upon Russian stuff. Most of the nations that the United States came to basically rescue in World War II, well, half of them became American colonies, and the other half came to become our opposition. Most of our enemies became, well, American colonies. Great Britain lost its entire empire. Now it's entirely dependent upon trade with the United States and Canada. Mainland Europe can keep them fed pretty easily. Same thing with parts of Africa. But America, man, we are really doling it out right now. Like we give a lot to Great Britain. But Great Britain, we can't call it Great Britain anymore. It's just not great. It's not great. Germany's not great. America's not great. Japan, definitely not great. Now, the Japanese lost their pride, lost their honor, and understandably so. They did some very dishonorable things to other human beings, but now they're still doing it. This drive to excel, this drive to exceed, this drive for perfection. Why? Some misplaced sense of superiority, because it's not a superiority thing. We are highly dependent upon Japan for a lot of stuff. Sort of. There isn't much that Japan produces that we here in the United States couldn't either copy or outright produce ourselves. Or aren't already outright producing ourselves, including better things. I'd get into a lot of the helicopter technology and a lot of the rocket technologies and things like that, but America's stuff is just really cool. Plus, we have multiple facilities that can produce more than what they're producing now. It's just a matter of how many people you have on the work floor. Some of it just comes down to how many riveters you got. Yes, a lot of helicopters and aircraft still use rivets. Although the Russians, when they first started making supersonic aircraft, they learned how to weld stainless steel, which is pretty cool to know. But Russia never became one of our colonies. They weren't going to bow down. And they haven't bowed down. I mean, they tried to dip out, but the United States isn't going to allow that. Come on now. You know, Russia, they go ahead and do their own thing, try to have their own whatever, starting in 1989. And we already knew that was going to happen in like 1987, folks, because that's when in the schools and on the news, they really started pushing that Muslims are some sort of horrible, horrible people or some crap like that. Well, okay, if that's what you want to teach kids, but we were growing up with Muslims in our schools at that point in time, and we were integrated, fully integrated. Like, we didn't have none of this internet telling us who to hate, telling us who to argue about, telling us we got to be up in arms about George Floyd. Now, we got a lot of nations that'll just go right along with what the United States government tells them. If the United States says it, it must be the way to do it. We get to see this in Britain using all of our anti-homeless laws. Of course, we borrowed them from them, didn't we? After the Civil War, we had to do something to keep slaves down now that they weren't slaves. And that came down to the Roman rental agreement. And that's a very British thing as well. A lot of people don't trace back their lineages or the lineages of the laws and rules and conduct that they follow to this day. A lot of them go back to the Romans, the Greeks, and the Chinese. A lot of it, though, it comes down to mass quantities of land that America has. We're further south than Canada, so we get more sunlight and we can produce more food as a result. Oh, it's fucking cold. Anyway, France kind of sort of pretends to do its own thing. But really, we can't see Great Britain as an independent nation anymore. We cannot see Germany as an independent nation anymore. We cannot see Japan as an independent nation anymore. These are all American colonies. These are quasi-independent nation states. No, they're not. None of them are independent. Not a single one of them is independent. Not a single one of them can produce enough for its population to survive, let alone thrive, without American involvement and American social programs, community giving. Community, like communism community or socialism social? Huh. So why is America giving socially to all these nations in Europe and of course Japan, but we're leaving Africa so greatly out of it? I mean, look at the stuff that we pulled in Somalia and Ethiopia. That was just the most FUD way to do it. I'm not some sort of great military strategist. I'm just a follower of history. I like to know the history of us. Where did we come from? Our ways of thinking, where did they come from? What was so great about the greatest nations on earth? Well, what it come down to is the happiness of the people. Alexander the Great, his people were pretty happy. Silas the Great, his people were pretty happy. But we get to see that history is written by the victor, or of course by the skin color. We like to believe Greek renditions of some very popular tales that are just complete horse shit. We've got some ideas about some of the great Iraqi leaders thousands of years ago that are just completely unfounded and untrue. Now there's a lot of evidence to suggest a lot of things could be true. Like when we try to pretend that the Carthaginians used to have babies sacrificed. No, they didn't sacrifice babies, but if a baby was stillborn or died early, then they were cremated the same as an adult would be, and put in an urn. We like to sell our own rendition of technology, our own rendition of national pride. Everybody's got their national pride, right? That's like having your local team. We get to see how sports worldwide is used to manipulate the masses. That's Roman too, isn't it? Are we not entertained? Nope, that comes from the Greeks. Israel is another one of our satellite countries. It's just basically an extension of the United States. They do what they want, for the most part. They also try to keep Russia happy, for the most part. But it does really seem like America and the American citizens, and of course our children and grandchildren and their grandchildren, and of course their grandchildren, are going to be paying off the debt that we've accumulated today by wiping the ass of babies across the planet. I really don't understand why it is that a population of a particular nation that is dependent upon the rest of the planet but can't get along with the rest of the planet, I don't see why it is that they can't find a way to produce their own food. I'm going to tell you what I mean by that. I was in Fred Meyer's earlier today, or yesterday, and I saw this little 6-foot tunnel. It's for kids to go crawling through and play in, right? And it folds up into this nice, neat little package, and it's small and it's easy to take care of. But the Israelis had this great idea of taking basically a bunch of those, except they were longer and a bit bigger, and they'd put plants in them. And there was a food shortage, and this is a story I was reading about. And I guess there's these characters there called imams, and they had a bunch of these things that Israel was trying to use, and I guess they're pretty effective, but I guess they gave them to some Palestinians to try out, kind of a peace gesture, and the imams wouldn't let them use them. What's that got to do with our colonies? Well, The thing is, we need to be working together, but we need to be working together for all of us. Collectively, all of us, even the people at the bottom. I mean, this Roman rental agreement makes it so that our lives are miserable, and you want us to what? You want us to divide. You want us to be at each other's throats over color and over gender and over who's into what and what's into who and who's got what piercings where and who's got what ink in what place and who's having sex with who and how much we got sex on advertising all over TV but don't sell sex in school and so on and so on and so on. And we need to put Jesus in everything and so on and so on and so on. And God, do you ever just get sick of hearing that? I mean, I remember walking down the street and looking to my left and seeing people and looking to my right and seeing people, and they were people to me. And then there's all the stuff that you try to shove down my throat. Like a lot of people want to tell me that I should hate all black people. I'm like, why? Well, you grew up in the system, you should know more than anybody. No, That's right, I did get my ass beat a lot for the color of my skin. What that shows me and teaches me is that it's wrong to fucking beat somebody up for the color of their skin. I didn't fucking like it. Why the hell would I go doing that to somebody else? That's fucked up. There's a lot of people that tell me I should, well, not anymore today, thank goodness, but back in the 80s and the 90s, there's a lot of people wanted to convince me that I should hate Japanese people. Like, man, look what they did to Pearl Harbor. I'm like, they? Man, most of the people in Japan were born after the war was over. They didn't have nothing to do with Pearl Harbor. What the hell's wrong with you? Now, you also get to see how Winston Churchill thought he was going to get to keep his empire, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt decided to put his foot down and stomp that one out. Hey, you want to keep your nation? All right, here's what you're going to do. You're going to stop this. After the war, of course, England, jolly old England, wanted to try to keep its colonies, got into a bunch of wars in a bunch of other places, and eventually they had to capitulate pretty much everywhere. Now Britain is not only a shell of its former self, it's entirely dependent on the United States of America. And with the whole Brexit thing, I don't care what all that's about. I don't. But they're kind of cutting themselves off and putting themselves into social isolationism. Now, France, we could definitely consider that. We could consider it an American colony to some degree, but not like Great Britain, not like Germany. Germany has some excellent social contracts, however. From the stuff I've been hearing from people in Germany, like they make it sound like it's the Taj Mahal. Of course, some of their laws are things that I wouldn't agree with. What do you mean I can't record a telephone call? What do you mean I can't record a conversation? Huh. Well, that'd make a lot of predators happy. Hey man, how do you know he was bragging about killing that lady? Oh, I recorded it. Oh, you're under arrest for recording it. Screw that. So, it's much like Great Britain's colonies. You notice in 1066, slavery became illegal in jolly old England. That's also the year that they made Westminster Abbey and also the very first coronation of an English monarch in Westminster Abbey. But they just changed the word. It's kind of like here with torture. When the police want to torture poor people, they just call it pain compliance. Same thing. I get to see how our society treats the poorest of its members. those who have nothing. They want to march us off into the sea. And they want us to march out there with nothing, with no resources, no place to prepare, no way to build. Homeless people in the United States. Here's what the United States does. They put homeless people on buses or in jails. When they put them on buses, they're sent somewhere where they're put on another bus to go somewhere else, where they're put on another bus to go somewhere else. Eventually, they're going to have a bus back to where they began. The whole time being stuck in desperate situation after desperate situation, because none of these places care about the individual. They just want that person gone, because homeless people are unsightly and you don't want to have to see them. You figure if you get them on a bus from Tacoma to Texas, right? So they get off at the terminal in Houston, and Houston's like, we don't want you here. We can't even put you on a bus right now, but sure thing. First opportunity we get to throw you on a bus to elsewhere, that's going to happen. And then we got other places talking about doing the same thing. We got the anti-homeless laws that literally killed hundreds of people in Boulder County alone. Just the anti-camping laws alone. Those murder people. That is murder by exposure. And any of these nations who are going to follow suit on that, who are going to say that's okay, who are going to put up spikes so that homeless people can't even sleep, so they have to stay out under the rain, so they have to be under the elements, so they have to endure freezing nights, soaking wet, while you complain how cold it is on your way from your front door to your nice warm vehicle and your nice warm clothes. Now sure, it'll take your vehicle a minute to warm up. Same thing for the rest of us. It's life. My heater doesn't work right now. Even when it does hurt, it's cold. It doesn't stay warm in here for very long because my hot water container was filled with coffee and it shot a hole through my window. Life happens. Now that's got nothing to do with Great Britain. Yeah, it does. Winston Churchill, you get to see where he sent American troops, where he kept on sending them. Winston Churchill made it difficult for any kind of crossing or landing. Most of Europe was pretty well undefended. I mean, what we want to pretend is defended. We went from joining the war in 1941, where there was wars all over. America could have marched right in there. And the British knew it, and the Germans knew it. But, of course, Franklin Delano Roosevelt had himself a master plan. He was a far more intelligent person than I want to give him credit for. But he was the grandson of Theodore Roosevelt, who was a political weasel. Whew. What we got going on now, after World War II, we got France trying to keep its colonies, and America kind of felt bad for France and kind of felt bad for its colonies, and we figured we'd stick our nose in where it didn't belong, and what happened? We got our asses kicked, same as the French. Woohoo! Sayonara, suckers. We didn't really try that hard for any of the British colonies, did we? Nope. Not really. And a lot of that came down to America being pissed off at China because, well, they had the Lend-Lease too, but we picked the wrong side. Did you pick the side of Chiang Kai-shek? Or are you a Mao fan? I hate to see the whole world wanting to get into a war over a lot of really stupid stuff. Now my question is, let's say the Donbass region is most people who want to be Russian. Why can't we move them over into Russia? There's plenty of land there. Well, that's because people want what's theirs. It's been in their family for years and years. Legacies are more important than human lives all over the world. Your legacy, your family's legacy. Did your father or your grandfather die an honorable death, and so on and the like? Really, why don't we have people who are actually here on their own reputation? Comfort, I suppose. Well, we got the United States doing a lot of really dumb stuff here, too. I mean, our population is paying for a lot of stuff, and what are we really getting out of it? Oh, we get quite a bit. We get the illusion of security. See, the thing is, them Europeans, that's where the wars would be fought. That's one thing America is not caring about. We don't care about the British. We don't care about the French. We don't care about the Germans. We don't care about Kiev. Oh, if we're told to, because there's a political agenda there. But really, it's our pawns that are going to fight the war. It's going to be fought on their squares. What's that saying? Knight to King 4? Jeez. Great Britain's right over there by Russia. Germany's right over there by Russia. We got Belarus. I mean, really, they're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. Now, Belarus and God, where's Kiev at again? Ukraine, that's right. Belarus and Ukraine both hold former Soviet capitals. I'm not really seeing a whole lot of effects here as far as that whole war goes. I mean, I'm definitely feeling financial effects. But I felt those effects before there was a war. The United States is taken from its people, and it's not taking care of its own people. The United States government is a lot like my mom. You gotta depend on everybody around you. Can't do shit for yourself. And then when people ain't got nothing left to give, you tell them how rotten they are. Well, I like that tactic. I use it against people who use it on me. The United States is fine with those wars over there as a matter of political maneuvering and ideology. Now, some of this ideology is definitely not worth fighting for, definitely not worth killing for, because we use it and utilize it as well. Communism, democracy, and of course socialism. All three of them have their names and their ideology in a very, very specific presentation. And that is a presentation to make the people happy. That's because everybody knows that mob rule is true rule. It doesn't matter if you want to tell them they can eat cake. The fact is that people will get angry if they are being mismanaged, misled, or, of course, being bloodied in the way that we all are right now, including Great Britain and our other colonies. This is a black mark on all of our societies. The fact that America's leading the way in it, and the fact that all of these nations have become capitalist nations, that deprives us of the humanity in all of us. It makes it so that it's not communist, it's not socialist, it's not democratic. None of those systems of government work because of something called propaganda and something called greed. Both of those work very well together. I'm willing to die for a lot of things. There's very few things I'm willing to kill for. When it comes to saving lives, I think that's something worth dying for certain, 100%. And I can see where the world's coming from as far as bowing down to the almighty United States, but y'all gotta look at the idiots we got in power. Alright, look at the people that the American public is voting into power. You guys want to make fun of trailer parks, but we're voting the trailer parks into office. At least that's how they try to play it off. A lot of politicians have to take courses on how to talk stupid. This is not a joke. They have to learn to sound more ignorant because the American population is not going to tolerate somebody who's a hoity-toity. It sounds nice, it sounds good, it sounds pretty. But of course, even the governor had to be German and had to be a very well-known actor before anybody gave a crap about him. Well, as far as politics goes. The thing is, the Great Britain thing, it's not great. It's not. There's a way that we can work together, and being idiots is not it. This whole divide and conquer thing is not it. Britain and Japan can now trade pretty freely, pretty openly, and actually pretty easily by going up through the Arctic Circle. Those two nations together can actually not do much without natural resources, and neither of those tiny islands has the resources on those tiny islands to self-sustain. Not yet. They'd have to disassemble a whole bunch of stuff and turn it into things that are efficient. What do we have efficiency for? Internet access? What about food growth? Why do we have our computers so they are so finely tuned, but you still got a grass yard? You still go to the grocery store to get something to eat. You can't raise your kids together and teach them how to grow that food. You don't have time. You don't have time. It takes 2.5 full-time jobs. That's in a poor area for you to make it. You need 3 jobs on average. It might be 3.5 full-time jobs on average to keep a household. A household is the roof over your head, the overhead, and the food divided among who's in the household and other expenses. Now when you figure it's not just the roof over your head, you've also got more than one person who needs to help pay that. If one person is not enough, let's say you get $1,600 for your overhead. That's how much money it's going to cost you to rent your place. But you're only getting $800 a month. Well, you need two incomes so that you can just pay the rent. And then, of course, if you're real nice and you're real frugal and you turn off the lights every time you leave the room, you might get away with $230 worth of bills with however many people are in the household. And I think the average is like 6 in a lot of places, which isn't much. But we also got to look at the type of households. We also got to look at the level of education that people are getting. We've also got to look at poverty and how poverty is treated by the government and, of course, by the police. People who are impoverished don't tend to like the police. People who are broke don't trust the police for a very good reason. It's because we're easy to target. They're not going to investigate themselves worth of crap. Now, why is it that all of our colonies are being disarmed? Well, it's kind of like the situation with Britain and having slaves all over the place. It's a lot easier to keep people under your thumb if they're unarmed. But of course, we sell to the American public that Britain is completely unarmed, and Australia is completely unarmed, and Germany is completely unarmed, and these are all completely anti-gun places, and yet there's still British gun owners legally owning their guns, talking about owning guns. And of course, we're taught that in Russia it's illegal to have a gun, and that's how Russia ended up the way that it is. Americans are so taught wrong. There was a period of time where it was illegal for Russians to have firearms, and it didn't last very long. That's because there was something called an invasion, and the Russian hierarchy decided, well, you know what? Maybe civilians should be allowed to have guns, just in case. One pissed off farmer can keep people held up for a bit. Now, with all of our colonies, there's got to be a way that we can achieve independence. That would be a lot easier to do if we weren't busy expending our munitions. I understand your reason for having the munitions, and to some degree I can understand showing it off. To some degree, just as deterrent, to let them know, hey, I can bloody your nose back. But we're not talking about bloody noses here, folks. We're talking about bodies. We're talking about human lives. Whether they speak Russian or American, they're still speaking. Speaking. They're not just grunts or guttural sounds. It's not barking or meowing. It's an entire language. And that's something these folks are capable of doing, and so are we. We got these Russians, they speak a different language, but they're still human beings. How about them Africans? They speak a different language, but they're still human beings. And not all of them speak a different language. We've got African peoples who only speak English. The United States doesn't really have any colonies in Africa. I mean, we kind of sort of helped get Egypt and the Sudan and areas like that. Kind of helped with the Rommel situation. Kind of helped out the British. But the reality is, the British were never going to keep their empire. The rest of the world had already had a taste of something different. realized that they were not inferior as the British had been teaching up to that point. On the bright side, those imperial days are over. Aren't they? No. No. America tells most of the free world what to do. So how free are they really? Meanwhile, capitalism is not democracy. It's not socialism. It's not communism. Capitalism is its own monster. Capitalism allows someone to hoard resources that are unhoardable. For example, tomatoes. A tomato doesn't last very long, does it? When you trade things, we should have the barter system. Trading straight across. Now, we don't actually have that going on here. We've got a huge navy. It's worldwide. We don't need it. We don't need a military this big. The United States government should be taking care of the United States people, not taking from them. We have quite a coalition for each of our nations to be independently operated instead of co-opted as far as our militaries go is kind of weird. I mean, we got most of the common people in a lot of different nations complaining that, hey, why is it that America has such a big major budget? And yes, there is a reason that makes everyone paranoid. Arms races lead to bad things. Now, it would be nice if America's colonies would find a way to regain their independence from America. But we see how difficult that was with the Nazi Empire. We got to see how difficult that was with the French empires and the British Empire. We've also got to see that with the Japanese Empire more than once. Well, their history records it, ours doesn't. I think Rodney King said it best when he said, "Can't we all just get along?" Good to be with you. Thanks for coming to visit. Stay out of trouble or don't get caught. Remember, you are your brother's keeper and no victim left behind.